so excited you're here, Monica.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm such an avid believer, my friends, about what we're going to talk about today, and truly about bringing and incorporating these ancestral healing foods in our diet so that we can really activate that healing capability within us. Give us a little background. Like, how did you get into this work? Where did you come from?
Yeah. So the way I started out in food was being a private chef in Los Angeles. And so I would work for families in their homes, and I would mostly work for like professional athletes or celebrities. And so the menus started to feel like a bit restrictive or monotone, just because of the demands of their careers. So I started just out of culinary curiosity looking back at my family's old recipes. And so half of my family is from Egypt and half is from Texas.
Oh, I
So
love
there's
it.
this huge mixture. And
Egyptian Texan.
yeah. So started to look back at these recipes from my Egyptian grandmother. And I remember sitting in the kitchen and just kind of watching her swirl around the kitchen and pickling vegetables and making lebna, which is this sort of soft cheese, making yogurt. She would cure meat in our in our kitchen. I remember we would slather these spices all over the meat, right? This raw meat. And then she would hang it from the light fixture in the kitchen.
Oh my goodness.
So, and I would sit there with my grandfather and we would drink tea, way too much tea, and she would feed us little bites of things. And so I started to look back at these recipes and they really just lit me up. And I started to realize the recipes were just sort of a loose guide. She had this alchemical excellence. There was like a discernment, an ability to judge. And it was this connection with the food and really like from a bigger perspective, just being present. So, it's something we don't do as much anymore. We just look at the recipe, we put it all together, we put it in the oven, we use a timer, we use a thermometer. There was nothing like that. She was there with the mezzaluna. So I found that so inspiring and I began to experiment with fermentation, true wild fermentation. So not even starter derived fermentation. And we can talk about the difference between that, but it requires you to be so present and so connected with what you're doing and to have discernment and judgment, which can be impacted by just the weather outside or your microenvironment or the barometric pressure or so many other things, where you sourced your ingredients, how long they've been in a distributor warehouse, or did you get them from a farmer's market and they picked them the next morning or that morning. So there were all these things that kind of felt almost like a moving meditation. And that just sparked this fire in me. I fell in love with fermentation. I fermented everything. I made drinks. I made all sorts of fermented foods, vegetables, fruits. I did everything under the sun, yogurt, different cheeses, and it was fantastically exciting. And I worked it in to these families' menus, and they started to see all these healings. So I remember the first one was a family who the mom had been suffering with eczema for like 5 years. And the people that I worked for had plenty of resources. So she had tried so many options that were out there, both in allopathic medicine and naturopathic medicine. But it turns out, Becky, that our bodies have evolved with this food, right? We haven't evolved with supplements. Our bodies know how to work with the food. If we give them the building blocks, our bodies will heal. And she healed completely from this eczema. And so this started happening with all these families I work for, and they would tell their healthcare practitioners. And then these healthcare practitioners started sending people to me, and my business just organically grew, really out of a need to I just couldn't go to that many houses. So now I have this commercial kitchen in Los Angeles. People order online and we deliver all over Los Angeles weekly. But it's still those foods that just light me up and allow me to witness people healing from all sorts of things on a daily basis. And I really just feel like a conduit. I don't think it really has much to do with me. It's this food that our bodies know how to use. It's wildly miraculous.
It really is. And I just want to bring our attention to again something you said is that this food has evolved alongside of us. This is real food and it's full of enzymes and probiotics. And okay, I'm ready to get started. Like how do we get into this? How do we begin to incorporate these foods into our lives?
I would say the first two most important things are one, fermented vegetable, and bone broth. And the reason for that is that bone broth has components that help you to build collagen. So when you apply heat to collagen, so we're using cartilaginous bones to make bone broth, that turns into gelatin. And that gelatin can be used in the body to make collagen in the body. And collagen is the most needed and most used protein in our bodies. And I think we all know, like, it's great for hair, it's great for skin, it's great for your nails, but it's also great for your joints and sealing your gut. And when you have a sealed gut, which, by the way, your gut lining is the thickness of half the thickness of a human hair. So it's very thin. And that's why we hear so much now about leaky gut, right? So you want to reinforce that. And we used to do that in our cooking because we always used to cook meat on the bone. We used to use those drippings to make sauces. We used to save our bones from eating, say, a whole chicken and make broth from that and make soup. So it just used to be part of a sustainable kitchen.
Yes.
And now we've normalized just getting a boneless, skinless chicken breast.
Yeah.
We don't get all of that goodness. It's really, we don't get as much from the muscle meat as we get from these bones. These bones are fortifying us. So bone broth, there are so many benefits that come along with a sealed gut. We can talk about it more, and then you really can't balance your microbiome, your gut microbiome, which helps you with digestion, not only the processing of food, but to get the nutrients you need from food. With your mood, that's where 80% of your serotonin is made, and it's made by your bacteria and your immune system too. So those two things are the place to start. To make sauerkraut, which is one of the easiest fermented veggies to make, is very simple and it's very cost effective. And to make broth, you can just literally cook a whole chicken, save those bones, all your vegetable cuttings in a little bag in the freezer, and pop it in and make broth, even in the slow cooker if you don't want to watch it on the stove. Yeah. And those two things are life-changing. It's important to know how much to eat and have a plan especially if you're healing something specific, but those two things will set your health far and above the norm that's out there.
It really is so simple at the end of the day. It's like incorporate these two things in your diet to really start healing your gut.
And so this makes me want to talk about wild fermentation. And I'm kind of a wild fermentation snob. So I do eat some fermented foods that are starter derived. Like, for instance, to make a particular kind of yogurt, you need a particular yogurt starter. To make a particular flavor of cheese or kind of cheese, you need those particular bacteria and yeast to make that flavor of cheese. But vegetables come imbued with bacteria on the outside of the vegetable. Primarily. There's some on the inside too, but primarily on the outside. And this changes depending on where the vegetable was grown, how long it's been kept before fermenting it, what variety of vegetable it is, like how many different kinds of vegetables you might mix into your fermentation, all sorts of things. It changes throughout the season, the different bacteria. And also during fermentation, there are particular bacteria that work during the first 5 days. And then it's handed over, the rest of the fermentation is handed over to other bacteria to finish it out. So it's this really amazing, intricate dance. And all we have to do is shred some cabbage, put some unrefined salt in a jar with some water, and then you have sauerkraut. But here's the difference. If you take a starter culture, what you're saying to your fermentation is this fermentation is going to be restricted to only these 5 different bacterial strains that are in your starter culture, usually around 5. And in wild fermentation, you're getting this diversity throughout the season, depending on what produce you're using. Is it organic, not organic? How long have you kept it in your fridge? How long was it kept at the distributor at Whole Foods? Or did your farmer just pick it? So all these sorts of things. The one thing we know about probiotics and health is that diversity is what determines robust health. More
Mm.
diversity of bacteria, probiotic bacteria, mean higher health, lower incidence of allergies, lower incidence of asthma, lower incidence of chronic disease even later in life, better digestion, all sorts of things, higher, more robust immunity. And in 1 tablespoon of wildly fermented vegetables, there are more strains of bacteria than in an entire jar of any probiotic on the market right now. Also, we assimilate them better because, again, it's food. It's not just this concentrated powder that we're taking in. So it's really incredible. It's so much more effective. I mean, if you want to get the most bang for your bite, you're going to eat some fermented food, and you're going to find wild fermented food if you really want to up your game. It's not in taking a powder every day. It's not in taking a supplement. Your body is excreting most of that, not because it's bad, not because it's bad, because we don't assimilate it as easily. And we also assimilate that food and that bacteria that's in fermented food much more easily, so we don't have to expend as much energy as well. It's this incredible, wonderful way of keeping our bodies healthy. And I haven't had a cold or a flu, or I wasn't really affected by any sickness during the pandemic as well for about a decade and a half. Not a cold, not a flu. And I used to get a cold once a year. I used to have seasonal allergies. I used to have some food intolerances, and I don't have any of that anymore. And that's wonderful. But the main thing that gives me is more time in my life to spend how I want to. I'm not the girl on vacation who stays in the hotel room vomiting from food poisoning, I'm out there on the surfboard.
Oh, I love it. I love it. There's so much that you said there. And what I'm really hearing is and it's just another example. The more we move back towards Mother Nature and we live in a way that is in alignment to how we are created, the healthier that we are going to be. But we've just gotten so far from
Yeah.
that. A lot of us are like, wait, wild fermentation versus so there's different ways to ferment, right? You can use you can use a starter culture, or you can use wild fermentation, which is basically probiotics that are already on the fruit or vegetable itself.
Yeah, you've got it. So all you're doing in wild fermentation is creating a hospitable environment for those bacteria to do what they were born to do. And you're just giving them the materials and a space, a container to do that in. And they will then convert, say, cabbage to something that is so much more nutrient dense than just raw cabbage. For instance, there's I believe it's 20 times, roughly 20 times more vitamin C bioavailable, so unlocked for easy digestion and absorption for us in fermented cabbage as opposed to just raw cabbage. I mean,
That's amazing.
isn't it?
I mean,
Yeah.
really, this food is truly medicine. I mean, yes, food is medicine, and this takes it to a whole new level.
It really does. And that is, fermenting cabbage is pennies on the dollar from what you'll buy it for. It can take time, as in not the making of a fermented item, but sitting on the counter.
Yeah.
So you're going to pay for that when you're having someone else make it, which is perfectly fine. I don't do everything in my life myself. I don't fix my car myself. We can't do it all ourselves. But if you do want to save that money, if you need to, if your budget allows for it, then you can make a big batch of sauerkraut and it will be fantastic for you. And you won't spend much at all to do it. Really just water, salt, a jar, and cabbage.
That's incredible. Now, do you need anything to put on top of it? Because I know that's one of my issues as I've been fermenting, that sometimes you need like a weight or something. Do you use weights? Kind of just give us a little more details around like what is it that do we need the weight? Do we not need the weight? I don't know.
Yeah. So, when I first learned that I could ferment cabbage, there wasn't so much information about it on the internet or in many books. And the only thing I saw was that you had to use a mason jar. That's what I saw in every picture. And so here in Los Angeles, I went around to so many stores. And if anyone is from Los Angeles, you know, you don't want to be driving around here all over the place. The traffic is insane. So at the end of the day, I was super frustrated. I gave up. I just went down to the corner market. I bought a gallon pickle jar, angrily emptied all those pickles out, and I made sauerkraut in it, and it worked great. So that's how high tech it was. And if you don't have a weight, because mantra for me as a fermenter is below the brine is fine. So if you remember that, yeah, because that brine doesn't allow in oxygen.
Okay.
That's a barrier for all the material or all the produce you have in your fermentation. So what I like to do, because I don't want to buy a bunch of gadgets and I don't want to require other people to either. You can buy weights. You can buy these really beautiful little glass weights, which are perfectly wonderful, or you can buy fermentation stones. Those usually come with fermentation crocks, and those are all great. But another thing you can do is if you're fermenting cabbage, to take off the outer leaves of the cabbage. And once you shred your cabbage, massage it, mix it with salt, mix it with some water if you like, press it down into your jar. So you pack that jar nice and tight, and then you put that bigger leaf on top and you press it down so that the brine comes on top of it. And that's your natural weight. That will weigh down that big leaf of cabbage, which will hold down all the rest of your shredded cabbage. And then you just put on the lid and allow it to ferment. Now, wild fermentation takes 2 weeks plus, however long you want to go. Starter derived fermentation is usually more like a week. Okay. So in starter fermentation, that's giving your fermentation a kickstart. The wild fermentation is going to be a little slower, but again, it's much better for you.
Well, that would be worth the wait. Okay. Now, another question. Yeah, but you don't need the wait or to wait.
You don't need the wait.
So so I've seen it fermenting different ways you've made it, you're going to sit it on the counter. Do you actually put an airtight lid, or do you put a cheesecloth or like a towel over it? Or is that determined on what exactly you're fermenting?
Yeah. What a great question. Okay. It is determined by what you're fermenting. Okay. Now, some people do ferment sauerkraut with just a cheesecloth on top. I toured an Amish farm, and that's how they were doing their fermentation for sauerkraut. It does allow in airborne yeast, which can cause yeast on top of the fermentation. The traditional wisdom on that is that you would just scrape off the top layer and continue to eat the rest. But in my view, it gives it a bit of a bitter taste. And so I avoid that by putting an airtight lid on. You can also use lids now that have an airlock, and it looks like this little scuba up from the lid. You can find them on Amazon. We can maybe link them below if you like. But people can put that on the lid on their jar. And what an airlock does is it allows oxygen or gas to leave, because the bacteria in the process of fermenting, one of their metabolites is CO2. So that gas will leave, but it will not allow oxygen back in. So that's the loveliness of an airlock. However, I just want to reiterate for all the people who are starting out who think, I don't want to have to buy all these gadgets. I literally used a cheap pickle jar, and it turned out perfectly, and it was wildly fermented. I didn't use a starter culture. I didn't use an airlock. You know, people have been doing this for hundreds of years. People traditionally make kimchi in a crock, just a pot that is literally clay and buried in the ground. So you don't have to get too fancy. You know, there's a lot of information on the internet that would make you think you need all sorts of gadgets, and you really don't. Now, if you're fermenting, say, kombucha is fermented with a SCOBY, and that stands for symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. So yeasts are fine. Yeast can enter. So you would cover that with a tea towel or cheesecloth.
It can be so confusing, and you can go on, there's so many different recipes and so many different contraptions. You're just like, oh, but no, all you need is a pickle jar, some cabbage.
That's right. That's right. And how wild that we used to have all of this information in us, because our families would talk about it. It would be so normal just a little over 100 years ago. And now none of us know this anymore.
Oh, I just think it's wild. I really do. I think it's just kind of crazy. And it does kind of show where we are in the reality of society and where our we've put what's most important is not health and wellness. But I believe we're coming back, Monica. All these pills and supplements, yeah, they're great, but they're not miraculous. And that's
Mhm.
what I really do believe about these foods is they are miraculous if you're consistent, right? You have to continuously eat them and feed and nourish and rebuild that gut.
Yes, it's very true. I get to see it in my clients all the time. We recently, I mean, I don't know if you know this, but 1 in 4 people now have fatty liver disease. And 100 years ago, we didn't see this other than in, severe alcoholism. So we would see cirrhosis of the liver, and fatty liver is just what comes before cirrhosis of the liver. So cirrhosis of the liver is a hardening of the liver, and eventually you die from this. And we had a client recently who had this diagnosis, fatty liver disease, for a decade. And she had tried just about everything she could think of to try. She had quite a clean diet. And so we have a menu of food items that people can order, of course, but we also have healing tract. So I'll do a consult with someone, figure out what the symptoms are, and then from there we'll design a little roadmap just to use this functional food to support healing. And so she did this for 3 months. She was so consistent. I mean, I really want to give her the credit because even though we deliver this food to your door, it's still outside of our normal habits. And you have to make a concerted effort and a real commitment to your health. You really have to choose yourself.
Oh, yes.
And she did that. And 3 months later, she went back in for her ultrasound, and her doctor told her that she no longer had any of the symptoms of fatty liver disease. And in fact, he said, all your organs look beautiful. And she called me, it makes me cry. She
So
called me crying, and all of her family were so elated because this is something that in allopathic medicine, we can diagnose and we can treat some of the symptoms, but we do not have a cure for it. I know.
I mean,
Incredible.
I don't think, the pharmaceutical company has never actually cured any disease. I mean, they don't cure it. They just, prolong or cover up the symptoms. And I just feel your heart because it's so beautiful when you can just offer your gift, something you're already doing to someone, and then see that miraculously change their lives.
It's incredible. And also to be able to witness people so often be empowered by that. Because that's the bigger thing. I mean, I am committed to eating this food because it changed my life, but not because I'm so committed to being healthy or having great digestion. It's because I want to be able to be free from being concerned with the pain of the body. I want to be free to live into my purpose. And it's really hard to be imbued with that joie de vivre if you are constantly stuck in worrying about this vehicle. This is here to take us through experiences. This is not what we're here to be concerned with, I don't think.
No, I completely agree. And, before kind of conventional medicine and, hundreds of years ago when we were living naturally, we didn't have these diseases. We didn't have these health issues. And now we're really at a turning point. I mean, we really are. We're really at this point where we need to start putting our health first. And we need to take care of this vessel.
Yeah.
And something so simple as fermented foods and bone broth, and really simply eating food that comes from Mother Nature, right? And we are nature, we must eat nature.
Yeah, we literally have more bacterial DNA in our bodies than we have human DNA. And so if we aren't feeding that, both with prebiotics, the kinds of food and nutrients that the bacteria in our microbiome consume, and also more beneficial bacteria such as probiotic foods, even going out and breathing in air where you don't normally go, hikes, walks, that imbues your microbiome with different bacteria, gives you more diversity. There are all sorts of ways, touching, kissing, hugging. These are all ways, walking barefoot to get more beneficial bacteria. But we should always be eating these fermented foods because if not, we are literally starving a huge part of our body.
Yes.
These symbionts we evolved with and they're what keep us healthy. This is why fecal transplants exist, It's when you get so far outside of taking care of your microbiome, of your body, of these bacterial symbionts, that you literally have to have a fecal transplant. This is how far we've gone.
I mean, it's crazy, and it's beautiful that we can start to, well, I think it says that we can start to turn kind of the bus around. We can turn our health around.
Absolutely.
And that's what's so beautiful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, really, when you go this route and you start using food as medicine, the body, it activates the body's healing capability. It then puts the body back into that healing mode. And but it takes something because we're not used to living that way. And that's why, I mean, we really have to bring this ancestral way of living back to the current modern, time.
Yeah, I pray for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we don't want to just live a longer life. We want to live an enjoyable, longer life. I want to see my mom live to an old age, but I want to see her do it with joy, not in pain. And I want that for all of us. It's not fun to live in a body with chronic pain. And that's what so many people around us are doing every day. And it's because we've normalized this food. We accept it as normal. Meanwhile, it's filled with the cheapest ingredients that are generally toxic to us just because we have not evolved with those ingredients. Maybe down the road we'll be great at living with microplastics, but at this point we are not.
Right now, then not so much.
But the biggest part is living in a world that does not normalize this food, that does not support our health. So our schedules do not support our health. The way that we interact with people and work does not support our health. The blue lights we're constantly using, I could go on and on, but that's why the support of commitment and accountability is really important. So we have these different tracks that people can choose. And that is how we get to see these results, like people curing their own fatty liver disease. It's wild because I constantly get to see these people, regular people, just like you and me, heal diseases that are technically incurable. But the body knows how. It's not me, it's our bodies have this wisdom that they've evolved with. And unfortunately, none of us completely understand it yet. Allopathic medicine is fantastic for acute problems. You break your arm, you need to go to the hospital and get yourself a cast.
That's right.
But for chronic disease, we're not so great at that yet. And none of us are, frankly. I love science. I read studies all the time, and I find it fascinating, and it uncovers ways that I see this food working for people. The way I've seen it work in my own life, my own health, my family's life, their health, and all my clients. But what amazes me the most is meeting someone who has lived through a diagnosis for so much of their life, lived in so much pain, and they just start peeling back the layers of that with food that is actually delicious. I mean, that's the really crazy part. Not remembering to take a pill. It's not drinking something that tastes terrible. It's not having something that gives you other side effects.
Yeah.
It is just frankly food that is delicious. I drink a cup of broth every morning that's seasoned wonderfully, and it gives me rush of amino acids, which is what all of my mood stabilizing chemicals in my body are made from. It gives me collagen, which gives me nice skin, strong nails, nice hair, and a sealed gut. It gives me juicy joints. So when I go to yoga, I feel great. I mean, it's just a delicious cup of broth in the morning. Yeah. But it's doing all those things because I do it every day. I have that broth every day. And it also requires me to slow down a little and just be in that moment, which is another thing that's wonderful.
Well, and I love how you've mentioned a couple times, this being present with our food as we create it. Because a lot of times, just like you said, we're busy. We have schedules. Our kids are doing all these things. We're running from here to there. And so we grab quick food and, we'll just grab food here. But I get that. Sometimes that's just how it needs to be. Yes. But day in and day out, it's not sustainable. I mean, for the body, you can't do that. We must get back into the kitchen and take some breaths. And I work with the food. I look at it. I'm like, put my hands over it. I'm like, you're going to just light up all my cells and bring me radiance. But it's really being present with the actual molecules that are going to become you. I'm at that point in my life where I am middle age, and my lifestyle for a very long time was leading me down the path of chronic disease. And thank God I was able to wake up and start to incorporate these foods. I'm a cup of bone broth every morning too, Monica. I think it's the only way to start your morning. And it's so easy to make. I mean, is it not? How many batches of bone broth do you make? Well, you
Oh
make it,
gosh,
but for yourself. Like,
8 gallons.
yeah.
I usually make a pot a week
Yeah.
at home, and that's just from my scraps from cooking. So just a roasted chicken, and I usually keep a bag of chicken feet in my freezer because you want those cartilaginous bones to give you better gelatinous broth. But yeah, I just literally keep a bag in my freezer. I put bones in it after I've served the food and eaten it. I put the bones in, and I put any cuttings from vegetables like onions, carrots, just the ends. And I use all of that. I add some salt and I slow simmer it. For chicken, 24 hours is great. For bone broth. For beef, you would go a little longer simply because of the density of the bones. I always have bone broth. So if I do need to take a cup to go, I can put it in my little thermos and go with it. But I can only do that if that's there in the fridge for me. So you do have to batch cook a little. And I don't know if you've ever any studies about this, but we actually, when we're cooking a meal, we begin pre-digesting in our mouths. So our salivary glands secrete enzymes, and also we have a whole microbiome in our mouth. It gets ready to digest that food. So your digestion will be better when you cook the food yourself as well. Just smelling it is part of digestion. You're beginning to digest.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Yeah, it's crazy. And you digest in a calmer state, you will digest more. And what does digest more mean? It doesn't just mean less bloating or less discomfort. It also means you'll be less tired after a meal. You'll receive more of the nutrients instead of just excreting them. It's crazy. Even bone broth, the big thing about the raw diet, right, is that you have all the enzymes available in the food because heat kills enzymes. So when you eat a cooked meal, there aren't many enzymes left in it. And so your body must provide those enzymes. And we have a finite amount of enzymes in our body. So this cooked food is hydrophobic. It will push away your digestive juices. But
Oh.
gelatin in bone broth is hydrophilic, and it will pull your digestive juices to that cooked mass of food. So let's say you baked a chicken and you use the drippings of that chicken baking to make a sauce, or maybe you just served a cup of bone broth, like maybe a little cup of miso soup before the meal. That gelatin is going to make your digestion so much easier. So there are all these really interesting things that have evolved around having a sustainable, traditional kitchen that are actually fantastic for us, that are healing, that are nurturing, that are laying down the foundation of health in our bodies,
Mm.
just as we share a meal together. What
Oh.
an incredible system.
So, I mean, it's exactly the way we were designed to live. It really was
Oh,
to create in the kitchen, be with your family. This just resonates so much because what I've seen since I've worked with mothers and kind of been on this path with them, we've just gotten out of the kitchen. And getting in back into the kitchen is challenging for some
very.
people. It is because it's like, I don't have time. But it's like,
Yes.
I get that. I get that. And let's reevaluate that statement a little bit. Because what do we have time for? Because eventually we're going to spend the time and effort some way. We're either going to invest it now in our health or we're going to invest it in our sickness.
It's very true. And your body will make you slow down at a certain point. You will, from a cold to a flu to an autoimmune disease, it will require you to do it. One wonderful thing that a couple of families I know have done is we got together and I taught them how to do some particular things like making slow simmer bone broths or making sauces from broth, or we also did a fermentation class. And these mothers, actually parents, there were some dads there too. They got together, they lived in kind of a somewhat close proximity, and they would get together on one day, have one big batch cooking day, and someone would make chili, someone would make meatloaf, someone would make a fermented veggie, someone would make salsa, and then they would just part it all out. They all only made one big batch of something, but they came away with a week's worth of food and a bunch
Oh,
of condiments. I mean, it's
wow.
pretty incredible. And they would just do that like twice a month and then fill in with when they could cook, they could do that. But otherwise they had this basically fast food in their freezers and fridges, and they didn't have to do all the work for it. So no, we don't live as communal as we used to, but maybe some of those attributes are something we should look at again in certain instances.
Absolutely. I mean, oh man, I mean, I'm down for anyone that wants to go live in a communal space and share meals and share all the tasks of every day. Like, because that's really how, our ancestors lived, is they lived in communities and little tribes, and we were around each other and we helped each other. Now we're all in our own little homes. We're trying to do it all of our on our own, and it's hard, especially when you have the kids and trying to make all the ends meet. It can be challenging. But really going back, that's one of the things I really believe in is having one day where you just focus on what can I make today that can feed me the rest of the week? What is something that I could do just to spend a few hours to nourish myself and my family? And it really starts there, is how can we get into the kitchen? And what I love so much about fermented foods, and especially now, Monica, wild fermentation, is that these are some really simple things that we can do, that even if we're not going to be perfect, but it can really start ourselves on that healing journey and nourishing ourselves. Just not,
Yeah, it's a really powerful act. And if we think about it, we have so many more conveniences now than people used to when this ancestral food was really being made in every home. But we filled our lives with so much that we have more conveniences, yet we're less efficient at making our own food, basically. So it's a reprioritization of things. It can be a transition that stretches us, but let me tell you, the gift of not being sick is incredible. It's priceless. It's indispensable. It doesn't just mean that I or you are healthier. It means that we can give more to people we love. We can enjoy more of what this life has to offer. And it makes living a privilege and adventure rather than something we're getting through. And that is a great relief. Something else that comes with it is more energy. So there is definitely a transition time, but when that energy begins to come back to us, because it's really something we were mostly born with, that makes more things possible as well.
Yes. Oh my goodness. It really is worth every investment that we can make. Really does, because it pays off. And who doesn't want less suffering? I do. I want less suffering in my life. And especially when it comes to your physical. I mean, I want to run with my grandkids. In order to be that, like there's good, I want to invest this time and into ourselves. And we must slow down. That's another thing I think we're really getting to, is like, in order to make these changes, we have to slow down, take some things off the calendar, say no more, and come back to ourselves and really nourish and take care of ourselves, because no one else is going to do it, Monica.
Yes, that seems to be true. And when you do that, when you desire to run with your grandchildren and play with them, you are showing them what is possible. You are dispelling the belief that as you age, you become sick.
Yeah.
And, you may not be, I don't know, running a race when
Right.
you're 80, or maybe you will be. I just did Bikram yoga, which is hot yoga for anyone who doesn't know. Very hot yoga, 105 degrees, 40% humidity, beside a woman who was 90. So pardon me if I offended anyone of that age, but you may not be running quite as fast, but at least you will feel healthy. You will be able to get down on your knees. You will be able to play. You'll be able to play with
And
joy.
get up. That's
Yeah.
another thing, to be able to get up. And yeah, oh my goodness. I mean, It's so beautiful because I think so many of us can get so caught up in like diet trends and supplements and protein shakes and all these things. And we need to come back. Like, what are the ancestral foods that humans have evolved aside that we can incorporate into our bodies more? How do our listeners find you? Like,
Yeah, so on our website, yes, we have recipes. You can look at our health program, which we offer to people all over the world. If you're in Los Angeles, you can take a look at our menu. Even if you're not in Los Angeles and you just want inspiration for your own kitchen, check out the menu. You can read the ingredients and you can endeavor to make those things yourself. If you're not in Los Angeles, if you are in Los Angeles, we will bring it to your doorstep.
oh, I'm moving to LA. Just kidding.
And other than that, Instagram, I know some people don't like social media, but I love that that can be a community. And I do answer DMs. I answer questions. If you post a question on one of our feed posts, it's going to help other people too. So please don't be shy. So that my handle on Instagram is Real Food Devotee. And that's my website as well, realfooddevotee.com. And I would love to hear from anyone because I really want to amplify this movement. As we do that, we're allowing people to live into their purpose instead of their pain. You're empowering someone to take control of their lives. And it's not just about our physical health. You know, it really grows you into something else to really share your gifts, be free to share your gifts. So I welcome anyone who wants to say hi.
Thank you. Thank you. And I really feel your purpose, like your true mission, is to really help people, live to their fullest. We've got this one life in this moment, right here, right now. And we can really be supported. And I think that's what people really need is they need inspiration. They need support. They need to know what actually is healing, not just some other ploy or gadget or thing that you need. No, this is what our ancestors did. So I will make sure, Monica, that I have your website and your resources that you mentioned and your Instagram page on in the links. So anyone that, check out Monica, be inspired. Thank you so much. And I'm so inspired.
Good.
All right, Monica, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, so fun. All right, everyone. We'll catch you on the next Hippie Moms podcast. Bye.